Thank you for spending another midweek moment with WPT. I'm Paul Roseski. Today is Wednesday, the 4th of September, 2024. It is the week after Labor Day, and by now, lots of people's routines have shifted as K through 12 schools have started back up again. It's a good opportunity to take stock in worthwhile activities that you could try to turn into habits. You can live your best life by doing something that will lead by example on National Leadership Day, which is today. On the other hand, you can do something to live your best life by celebrating Eat an Extra Dessert Day. That's also today. Either one can be personally satisfying. While you pause to consider your many options, I will take advantage of you being distracted while I transition into jumping into some news together. Let's start off with a quiz. Do you know what the federal corporate tax rate is? While you consider that question, I'll let you know my inspiration for asking. It's because there was a nationwide poll conducted last week of 1,000 registered voters. 56% of voters believe cutting taxes on businesses is either very good or somewhat good for the economy. 29% believe it is either somewhat bad or very bad, with 14% saying they weren't sure. 10% of people said it is very bad for the economy to cut taxes on businesses. Just putting that out there. That must mean that the majority of people would be happy to know that we've come a long way in the past few decades. In the early and mid-90s, the worldwide average of corporate tax rates was over 40%. Slowly and gradually over time, that worldwide average has crept down, and the worldwide average now is around 25.67% approximately. A distinct majority of countries have a base corporate tax rate of 20 to 25%, including the U.S. Thanks to the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, our corporate income tax went from fourth highest in the world to middle of the pack. So, what is the takeaway for Wisconsin businesses? Let's start by giving the answer to our trivia question. The profits that a corporation earns are taxed at the rate of 21% by our federal government. That is the corporate tax rate. Wisconsin's corporate tax rate is currently 7.9%, which puts the grand total of corporate tax rate burden for Wisconsin businesses at 28.9%, which means that Wisconsin businesses are taxed higher than the average business worldwide. At the end of the day, lots of businesses make capital expenditures at the end of each year to spend profits so they don't have to pay the taxes. But the smaller the business, the harder that is to justify to spend money and use cash flow. So at the end, this tax is more likely to hurt smaller businesses. So I ask the question, cutting the corporate income tax, is it being a tax cut for the rich? Is that more politics than reality? That's my question. And before we move on, let's review. For those of you that have been keeping score and that are faithful listeners, number one, thank you very much. But as we look at other states, Wisconsin is 10th highest for property tax burden and 12th highest for corporate income tax burden in the United States. And yet, in the last legislative cycle, what was the final push for what to do with the state's budget surplus? Tax cuts, yes, but it was income tax cuts, which, don't get me wrong, WPT will support the opportunity to cut taxes. But again, I will ask, is that more politics than reality? And in other news, I'm going to stay on brand and talk about property and how expensive it is right now in Wisconsin and how property taxes play into it. Milwaukee had one of the highest jumps in rent increases in the entire nation. And I'd be willing to bet the mortgage that the massive school referendum that squeaked through has something to do with it. Madison has the highest rents of any of the other Big Ten school cities. And you want to get a real idea of how people are getting by right now? When you look at the numbers, Milwaukee inner city voters flipped to a no vote on the most recent school referendum, and it was carried across the finish line by the outlier communities like Shorewood in the northwest corner of the district, the well-to-do area with people that aren't going to feel the pinch of struggling to make ends meet, where another property tax jump will just feel inconvenient instead of painful. You want to get a real idea how people are getting by right now. Total credit card balances rose 5.8% from a year ago, and data from Equifax shows that credit card delinquency is still rising. You want to get a real idea of how people are getting by right now? Consider this. Consider what this says about consumer confidence and confidence in the economy. Another poll conducted just 2 weeks ago by RMG Research asked non-homeowners this question. It was 1,000 voters, non-homeowners, and they were asked, generally speaking, is this a good time for someone to buy a first home? 11% said yes. 11%. That is a temperature check that needs to be an earworm for every lawmaker, because that isn't obvious to everyone. That is the temperature of the economy right now. Here's a great example. There's an op-ed from In Business magazine. It's Madison's business magazine that has the obligatory annual 40 under 40 list and the top CEO list and all those other ways to acknowledge success in the business community and contrived ways to push advertising. In its September issue, there's an op-ed that looks like a pay-for-play article, and hey, maybe it's not, but it's one page before someone promoting his new book. The article argues that Madison's housing crisis is because the city cannot afford the public streets, the off-site sewer improvements, and stormwater management that a multifamily project would need to be able to happen, that it would need to be able to offer more housing in Madison. Let's simply take this paragraph at face value, and I quote, "Is it better for the city to have no development at all, or should Wisconsin cities encourage growth under the current model? There are few options left for cities. Referendums are an option, and the city is holding one. But better solutions could come from the state by eliminating levy limits, increasing municipal aid payments, or allowing cities to raise funds through other means such as the sales tax." And you know what? The author's laying out a wide range of options to consider, because it probably will not just be one option that'll be the solution. But as many of our members know, the idea that was here, that our sales tax is one of the lowest in the nation, and it's a consumption tax, which by its nature, it's an equitable tax because it's a consumption tax. But let me tell you this. First off, the municipal aid payments from the state took a massive jump this past budget, number one. Number two, part of me just can't help but think that the author, who's a partner at a law firm, considers eliminating levy limits as a solution in a county that is in the top 100 of tax levy counties out of over 3,000 counties in the nation. It's the clear and present danger of Shorewood all over again because it's even being floated as an option. This is what WPT is up against and why, when it comes to taxes, never take anything for granted. And don't fool yourself. We could have the fiscal health of Illinois, and we could have the tax burden of Minnesota with ideas like this. And yeah, Minnesota, ironic. When it comes to collegiate football, it felt like every year Wisconsin was number 1 and Minnesota is number 12. Well, flip that when it comes to corporate tax rate. Remember how Wisconsin was number 12? Well, yeah, overachiever Minnesota sticks it to small business like no one else. Number 1 in the entire nation and over 2% higher than Wisconsin. One of more than 1,000 factors to consider in November. Just saying. And finally, I apologize that I ran out of time for my story from the You Can't Make This Up file. Yes, I have another one, and maybe I'll go off on less of a tangent next week. But no such luck this week, and I ain't done yet. How about these words from founding father President Thomas Jefferson, who said, quote, "Never spend your money before you've earned it." Timeless wisdom. Now comes that part that may not sit well with everyone listening, but it is relevant to the tone of this week's episode because we are getting after it. Let's consider the quote through the lens of taxes. Quote, "Never spend your money before you've earned it." Unquote. Well, one could argue that not one penny of collected taxes is actually earned income by the government. And maybe that is one of the roots of the problem. Have a great second half of your week, and as always, thanks for listening. Wisconsin Property Taxpayers Inc. is a nonpartisan membership organization consisting of thousands of small business, farm, and homeowner members in every corner of the state. Founded in 1985, the organization is committed to providing its members with up-to-date information, legislative advocacy, and exclusive cost-saving benefits. Find out how to join at wptonline.org/join.